James Dean.
I used to fly around quite a bit, you know. I took a lot of unnecessary chances.
September 30th, 1955. A silver Porsche on a California highway. A young star with everything ahead of him. A Ford sedan making a left turn. In one instant, Hollywood lost its brightest light and the world gained a legend. This is speed, glory, and disaster. The end of James Dean. James Dean didn't set out to be a racer. He set out to be an actor. Born February 8th, 1931 in Marion, Indiana, Dean moved to California after his mother died when he was 9 years old. He grew up between Indiana and California, studying theater arts at UCLA before eventually landing small television roles and Broadway parts. But it was in Hollywood where he found his calling, and where he found something else that would define his final months: speed. In April 1954, after landing the role of Cal Trask in East of Eden, Dean bought himself a Triumph Tiger T110 motorcycle and a used red 1953 MG TD sports car. These weren't just toys for a young actor with money to spend. They represented freedom, movement, the kind of adrenaline rush that acting, for all its rewards, couldn't quite match. By March 1955, Dean had upgraded. He traded in the MG for a brand new white Porsche 356 Super Speedster, purchased from Competition Motors in Hollywood. The Speedster was a rare machine. Porsches were in short supply in America, and Dean's celebrity almost certainly moved him to the head of the waiting list. It was a fairly standard configuration with baby moon hubcaps, small bumper horns, and mesh stone guards fitted on the headlights. The car had a 1500 Super engine and black California number plates with yellow letters. It was beautiful, fast, and dangerous. Dean didn't just want to drive the Speedster, he wanted to race it. And that's exactly what he did. On March 26, 1955, just before filming began on Rebel Without a Cause, Dean entered his new Speedster into its first road race at Palm Springs. The Palm Springs road races were held at the airport, favored by racers for their long, fast straightaways. Dean was nervous. He chain-smoked before hopping into the Porsche he'd owned for barely 2 weeks. Nobody gave the movie actor much of a chance. Veteran followers of the sport didn't expect Dean to compete seriously against experienced drivers. His studio, Warner Brothers, didn't even know their precious property was flying low at high speeds on an airport runway. But Dean surprised everyone. At the end of the first lap, Dean led by 300 yards. By the end of the second lap, he'd widened his gap to 400 yards. On the sixth and final lap of the 2.3-mile race for engines under 1,500 cubic centimeters, he crossed the finish line with a half-mile between his super speedster and the second-place finisher. James Dean had won his first race. The next day, he competed in the main event against veterans like Ken Miles and Cy Yador, both driving MG specials. Dean finished third, but later Miles was disqualified on a technicality, and Dean was bumped up to second place. In his first weekend of racing, the 24-year-old actor had proven he wasn't just playing at being a race car driver. He had genuine talent. Dean's close friend Lou Bracker was at Palm Springs that weekend. Bracker wasn't interested in sports cars at the time, but Dean's legendary curiosity and enthusiasm caused the racing bug to strike him too. Bracker would later race Porsches himself, eventually driving the very same super speedster Dean had raced that day to a second-place finish 6 months after Dean's death. Dean raced again at Minter Field in Bakersfield on April 30th and May 1st, finishing first in the production class and third overall. His final race with the Speedster came at Santa Barbara on Memorial Day weekend at the end of May. Dean was running fourth in that race until he over-revved his engine and blew a piston. The car was out, but Dean's passion for racing was only growing stronger. Warner Brothers had a problem. Their rising star was risking his life on racetracks while he should have been focused on making movies. Dean had just finished Rebel Without a Cause and was about to start filming Giant, a sprawling epic that would require months of work. The studio couldn't afford to have their investment destroyed in a racing accident. So they laid down the law. During production of Giant, James Dean was contractually barred from racing. No exceptions. The fear was obvious. Injury or death would cost the studio millions and leave a major motion picture unfinished. Dean had no choice but to agree. The ban didn't kill Dean's passion, it just made him want to race even more. During the filming of Giant, he talked about cars constantly. He visited races when he could, spending time in the pits, talking with drivers and looking at their machinery. He watched other people race the cars he wanted to be driving, and he made plans. Dean had seen the Porsche 550 Spider in action at Santa Barbara and talked at length with fellow driver John Porter about the car. The 550 Spider was something else entirely. It was a purpose-built race car, not a street car modified for racing. It had an aluminum body, a powerful four-cam engine, and could hit 140 miles per hour on a straightaway. The car sat so low to the ground you could swing a baseball bat over it and miss the windshield. It was fast, beautiful, and deadly. Dean wanted one, and as soon as filming on Giant wrapped in September the 1955, he was free to get it. On September 21st, 1955, James Dean walked into Competition Motors in Hollywood and made a deal. He traded in his Porsche Speedster for a brand new silver 1955 Porsche 550 Spider, chassis number 550-0055. The car cost $7,000, a fortune in 1955. Dean also purchased a new 1955 Ford Country Squire station wagon and an open trailer to tow the Spider to races. The Porsche needed customization before it was race-ready. Dean took it to custom car painter Dean Jeffries, who painted Racing number 130 in washable black paint on the front hood, doors, and rear deck lid. Dean didn't have his permanent California Club license yet, so the number was temporary. Jeffries also painted something else across the rear, cowling in script. Little Bastard. The nickname had a story. Bill Hickman, a Warner Brothers stunt driver who became Dean's friend, called Dean Little Bastard, and Dean called Hickman Big Bastard. But there was another version. Warner Brothers president Jack Warner had once called Dean a little bastard after the actor refused to vacate his East of Eden trailer on the studio lot. Dean wanted to get even with Warner by naming his race car Little Bastard and defiantly showing that despite the racing ban during filming, he would be racing between projects. The Porsche had red leather bucket seats and red tail stripes painted by the Stuttgart factory. Dean's mechanic, Rolf Wuderich, affixed a badge to the left flank of the car. Wuderich had received the badge while working at the 1954 Nürburgring 1,000-kilometer race and wanted Dean to have it as a symbol of their friendship. Dean was thrilled with his new car. He showed it to everyone he could, but not everyone shared his enthusiasm. British actor Alec Guinness met Dean in Los Angeles about a week before the fatal crash. Guinness would later write in his diary that the sports car looked sinister to him. Exhausted, hungry, and feeling ill-tempered despite Dean's kindness, Guinness said something in a voice he could hardly recognize as his own. "Please never get in it. If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it by this time next week." Dean laughed it off. He was 24 years old, invincible, at the top of his game. Giant was finished. Rebel Without a Cause would be released in a few weeks. His racing career was just beginning. He had entered the upcoming Salinas road race scheduled for October 1st and 2nd, and he couldn't wait to test the little bastard against serious competition. Dean hadn't driven the Spider enough to fully qualify for the race, so Wutherick recommended that Dean drive it from Los Angeles to Salinas instead of towing it. This would give him more time behind the wheel and help break in the engine. It seemed like a reasonable plan. It would prove to be a fatal decision. Friday, September 30th, 1955, started like any other day. Dean and Wutherick met at Competition Motors in Hollywood to prepare the little bastard for the weekend races. Following behind them would be Bill Hickman driving Dean's Ford station wagon with the trailer hitched, accompanied by professional photographer Sanford Roth, who was planning a photo story about Dean at the races for Collier's magazine. The group had coffee and donuts at the Hollywood Ranch Market on Vine Street across from Competition Motors. They left around 1:15 in the afternoon heading north. They stopped for gas at a mobile station on Ventura Boulevard around 2 p.m. Dean was photographed there sitting in the Silver Spider, looking relaxed and happy. It's one of the last photos taken of him alive. They headed north on what's now Interstate 5, then through Grapevine toward Bakersfield. Dean was enjoying the car, letting the air-cooled Boxer engine roar, feeling the speed and responsiveness of a machine built for one purpose. At 3:30 p.m., both Dean and Hickman were stopped by California Highway Patrol Officer Odie Hunter near Bakersfield. Dean was ticketed for going 65 in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. Hickman got a ticket too, doing 60 in a 55 zone. The tickets didn't slow Dean down. If anything, they might have made him more determined to make up time. He kept driving, heading west on Route 466 toward the junction with Route 41 near the tiny town of Chalame. The sun was setting, creating that peculiar California twilight where everything is bathed in golden light but shadows grow long and deep. At approximately 5:45 p.m., James Dean was approaching the intersection of Route 466 and Route 41. He was traveling at high speed, probably around 85 miles per hour, though some estimates put it even higher. The little Porsche sat low to the ground, silver paint catching the fading light, the number 130 painted on its sides. Coming from the opposite direction on Route 466 was a 1950 Ford Tudor sedan driven by 23-year-old Donald Turnipseed, a student at California Polytechnic State University. Turnipseed was heading home. He'd been at class that day. He had no idea who James Dean was. Turnipseed reached the intersection and began making a left turn onto Route 41. He didn't see the Porsche. The car was small, low, and moving fast in the gathering twilight. The glare from the setting sun would have made it nearly impossible to spot, no matter how carefully Turnipseed was watching the road. Dean saw the Ford turn into his path. He had seconds to react. He tried to avoid the collision, but there wasn't enough time. The little bastard slammed into the Ford's driver's side at full speed. The impact sent the Ford nearly 40 feet down the road. The Porsche was destroyed instantly, its front end crumpled, the driver's side taking the worst of the damage. Rolf Wuderich was ejected from the car and thrown clear. He survived with a broken jaw, broken leg, and multiple cuts and contusions. Donald Turnipseed was dazed but walked away with only minor injuries. James Dean was still in the car. He'd suffered massive internal injuries and a broken neck. He died almost instantly. By the time an ambulance arrived and took him to Paso Robles War Memorial Hospital, there was nothing anyone could do. He was pronounced dead at 6:20 p.m. The actor who had defined teenage rebellion, who had shown a generation of young people that it was okay to feel lost and angry and searching, was gone at 24. He'd owned the Porsche for exactly 9 days. On October 11, 1955, an inquest was held at the council chambers in San Luis Obispo. Turnipseed told the jury that he did not see the low-profile Spider until after he was already turning left onto Route 41. After testimony from the California Highway Patrol and witnesses, the coroner's jury returned a verdict of accidental death with no criminal intent. Turnipseed was found not guilty of any contributory wrongdoing in Dean's death. But being found not guilty didn't erase what had happened. Turnipseed had been dealt a devastating blow that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He granted just one interview to the Tulare Advance-Register newspaper immediately following the crash. After that, he refused to speak publicly about the accident ever again. He later owned and operated a successful family electrical contracting business in Tulare, living a quiet life far from the spotlight that had momentarily and tragically touched him. For Dean's friends and family, the loss was incomprehensible. Lou Bracker had spoken with Dean on September 18th when Dean showed up at his house in the new Spider. Bracker quickly made a deal to trade in his Porsche Speedster for the supermodel Dean had just left at the dealership. Less than 2 weeks later, his friend was dead. Hollywood was stunned. Only one of Dean's 3 major films, East of Eden, had been released at the time of his death. Rebel Without a Cause would premiere on October 27, 1955, less than a month after the accident. Giant would open in 1956. Both films would be massive hits. Dean would receive 2 posthumous Academy Award nominations for Best Actor, the only actor to achieve that distinction twice. The crash made Dean more than a star. It made him a legend. A young man who lived fast, burned bright, and died before he could age or fade or disappoint anyone. Forever 24. Forever the rebel. Forever the embodiment of that particular American restlessness that has no name but everyone recognizes. The story of the Porsche 550 Spider didn't end with Dean's death. If anything, that's where the strange tale really begins. The wrecked car was declared a total loss and sent to a salvage yard in Burbank. Dr. William Eschrich, an amateur racer who had competed against Dean 3 times in 1955, tracked down the totaled Spider and bought the engine, transmission, and other parts that were still working. Eschrich installed the Porsche 4-cam engine in his Lotus 9 race car, creating what he called a POTUS. Eschrich sold the transmission and other parts to his friend, Dr. Troy McHenry, another Los Angeles-based doctor and racer. Just 11 months after Dean's death, both Eschrich and McHenry crashed at the same race, the 1956 Pomona Road Races, while driving cars with little bastard parts. Eschrich survived his crash. McHenry didn't. His car hit the only tree on the racetrack, and the impact killed him instantly. The mangled chassis and body of the Porsche were purchased by George Barris, a custom car designer who would later create the Batmobile. Barris announced he was going to rebuild the little bastard, but the wrecked chassis had no remaining structural integrity. Instead of rebuilding it, Barris decided to capitalize on the car's notoriety. He loaned the wreckage to the Los Angeles chapter of the National Safety Council. From 1957 to 1959, the destroyed Porsche went on a gruesome tour of car shows, movie theaters, and bowling alleys as part of a highway safety exhibition. The message was clear. This is what happens when you drive too fast. Look at what speed did to James Dean. But strange things kept happening around the car. In March 1959, while in storage in Fresno, the Porsche mysteriously caught fire. 2 tires melted and some paint was singed, but the fire didn't spread to other vehicles in storage. The car seemed to survive its own destruction. There were other incidents, some confirmed, some rumored. Barris had sold a pair of tires from the 550 and both reportedly blew at the same time, causing the new owner to career off the road. The car allegedly fell off the back of a truck and crushed the legs of a mechanic standing nearby. A truck carrying the Spider's chassis to another highway safety exhibition skidded off the road, killing its driver. People started calling the car cursed. Alec Guinness's warning seemed prophetic. The little bastard, which had killed James Dean, appeared determined to keep killing. In 1960, the National Safety Council shipped the Porsche from Miami to Los Angeles in a sealed boxcar. When the train arrived and the boxcar was opened, the Porsche was gone. Vanished. Nobody knows what happened. Some believe the story was fabricated to escape constant requests to display the wrecked car. Others think it was stolen, though stealing a famous wrecked Porsche from a sealed boxcar seems impossible. In 2005, the Volo Auto Museum offered $1 million for information leading to the car's recovery. In 2015, a man claimed he'd seen it hidden behind a false wall as a child. He passed a polygraph test. Museum officials thought they'd found it. Then the story fell apart. The little bastard remains missing. The only confirmed part is the transaxle, discovered in Massachusetts in 2020 and sold for $382,000 in 2021. The rest, if it exists, is somewhere out there, one of automotive history's greatest mysteries. James Dean made 3 major films: East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant. Total screen time, less than 4 hours. Yet his impact on American culture is immeasurable. Dean represented something new in the 1950s. He wasn't the clean-cut hero, he was troubled, vulnerable, searching. His characters were young people trying to find their place in a world that didn't seem to have room for them. He spoke to a generation that felt the same way. His death cemented that image. He never got old, never sold out, never made a bad movie. He stayed forever young, forever that moment when talent meets beauty and creates something unforgettable. The crash site near Cholam became a destination. People leave mementos, photographs, sunglasses, notes. In 1977, a Japanese businessman erected a stainless steel memorial there. It's still maintained today. The intersection remains dangerous, 3 times the state average for fatalities. Promised repairs have been delayed for years. Dean's legacy extends beyond film. He influenced fashion, photography, music, and youth culture. Every brooding young actor owes something to James Dean. His passion for racing influenced Hollywood stars like Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, who followed the path Dean started. It's easy to focus on the death and forget the person. James Dean was 24 when he died. He'd been a professional actor for barely 5 years. Before that, he was just a kid from Indiana trying to make it in Hollywood. He loved motorcycles and cars, but also jazz music, photography, and poetry. He played the bongos. He was intensely private, but craved attention. He could be charming or difficult. He was human. His friend Lou Bracker remembered Dean giving him advice before Bracker's first race in 1955. Dean gave Bracker his helmet, signed it, and said, "Now I'll always be in the car with you." He told Bracker to relax, to not try to win, but just see what racing was about. Dean didn't follow that advice himself. He went full throttle, banging up machinery and blowing pistons in his determination to win. That was Dean, all or nothing. No halfway measures. That intensity made him great on screen. And that's what killed him on a California highway when a college student made a left turn without seeing a silver Porsche coming fast. The hardest part of James Dean's story is all the what ifs. What if Dean had towed the Spider instead of driving it? What if he'd left an hour earlier or later? What if Turnip Seed had looked one more time before turning? There are 1,000 tiny moments where fate could have changed. Dean was always 1 second away from living. If the speeding ticket had taken longer, if he'd stopped to talk to another driver, if anything had been slightly different. But history doesn't deal in what ifs. On September 30th, 1955, at 5:45 p.m., James Dean died near Cholame, California. He was 24 years old. He'd been famous for barely a year, and he became immortal. Speed, glory, and disaster. Those 3 words captured James Dean's final year. The speed of his Porsches tearing down racetracks and highways. The glory of starring in 3 films that would define a generation. The disaster of a young life cut short by a moment of bad timing and bad luck. Dean wanted to race. He wanted to act. He wanted to live life at full throttle with no regrets and no compromises. For a while, he got to do exactly that. He won races and made movies and became a star. He bought the fastest cars and surrounded himself with people who shared his passions. He lived more in 24 years than most people manage in 80. But speed has consequences. Racing is dangerous. Always has been. Always will be. In 1955, safety equipment was primitive. There were no roll cages, no proper seat belts, no crumple zones designed to absorb impact. When Dean's Porsche hit that Ford sedan, there was nothing to protect him. The force of the collision at 85 miles per hour was simply too much for a human body to survive. The tragedy is that it didn't have to happen. Dean was skilled, but he was also young and still learning. The Porsche 550 Spider was one of the most dangerous cars ever built. Fast, light, powerful, and unforgiving. In the hands of an experienced racing driver, it was a precision instrument. In the hands of someone who'd owned it for 9 days, it was a potential death trap. Dean knew the risks. Every racer does. But knowing and believing are different things. At 24, death seems impossible. You're invincible. The crash happens to someone else. The warning from Alec Guinness becomes something to laugh about, not something to take seriously. And then it happens. And the laughing stops. And a silver Porsche becomes a twisted wreck on the side of a California highway. And the world loses James Dean. If you found this story moving, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more looks at the moments that changed history. The what ifs and the might have beens, the triumphs and the tragedies, the people who burned bright and left too soon. Thanks for watching and drive safe out there.